The biggest mistake that people tend to make after they finally manage to escape a narcissist is the belief that maintaining no contact is the ultimate form of revenge. It is a very common assumption, but it is not entirely accurate. In reality, there is something that wounds them far more deeply, yet it is something that most survivors unintentionally avoid doing. By the end of this script, you will fully understand the one thing that leaves a narcissist feeling truly powerless. This does not happen because you have actively tried to hurt them, but rather because you have successfully removed the one specific advantage they always relied on. If you have ever found yourself wondering why a narcissist suddenly reappears months or even years down the road, or why they seem to be strangely obsessed with you long after you have moved on, the answer is not as straightforward as them simply missing you. It is entirely about them losing access to something that they felt belonged to them. Please stay until the very end of this message, as the final point will explain why many survivors unknowingly continue to feed a narcissist even after they have strictly implemented a no-contact policy. One of the most widespread misconceptions regarding narcissistic relationships is the firm belief that going no contact is automatically the most painful consequence a narcissist could ever experience. While it is true that establishing no contact is an incredibly vital boundary for protecting your mental health and creating the necessary space to heal, it is not necessarily the event that shakes their foundation the most. What often creates a much greater, more jarring impact is something that only develops after no contact has been consistently maintained for a long, extended period of time. That factor is your complete and total emotional independence. A narcissist can actually tolerate silence for quite a while because silence leaves plenty of room for their own imagination to run wild. In those quiet moments, they may try to convince themselves that you are still sitting there thinking about them, waiting for them, or perhaps secretly hoping that they will make a return. As long as they harbor the belief that they still occupy a significant and influential place in your emotional world, they can effectively preserve the illusion that their power over you remains entirely intact. The much deeper, more damaging blow comes when that specific illusion completely disappears. This happens when you genuinely stop organizing your internal emotions around them. Once you reach that point, they lose something they relied on for consistent validation. They are no longer the primary focus of your difficult decisions, your lingering fears, your future hopes, or your daily internal dialogue. Your personal happiness no longer depends on their approval, and your internal peace is no longer disrupted by anything they choose to do or say. That profound emotional shift is incredibly difficult for someone who previously depended on having psychological influence over another person. It sends a clear signal that the control they once assumed was permanent has finally faded away. This is precisely why the process of recovery is so much more than just blocking a phone number or avoiding a face-to-face conversation. True, lasting freedom happens when you no longer measure your personal worth through their biased opinions or define your future based on what happened in that relationship. The greatest, most significant change is not the silence between you. It is the exact moment your inner world no longer belongs to them. One of the most surprising truths about narcissistic dynamics is that intense emotional reactions can actually keep the connection between you alive. Many people mistakenly believe that expressing their intense anger, demanding some form of accountability, or repeatedly confronting a narcissist will somehow force them to finally recognize the immense damage they have caused. In reality, these kinds of reactions often serve to confirm to the narcissist that they still possess emotional influence over you. Whether the specific emotion you are feeling is love, deep frustration, sadness, or resentment, the common thread is that your focus and your attention remain squarely fixed on them. They continue to occupy valuable space in your thoughts, and that ongoing emotional investment can actually reinforce their sense of personal importance. This is why reaching a state of genuine indifference is so incredibly significant. Indifference does not mean that you are pretending that nothing ever happened. Nor does it mean that you are stuffing your emotions away or suppressing your true feelings. Instead, it means that you have finally reached a place where their choices no longer dictate your mood, your self-confidence, or your core peace of mind. You stop feeling that internal compulsion to explain yourself, to defend your past decisions, or to constantly prove your value to someone who is incapable of seeing it. Their criticism loses its sharp ability to define who you are, and their praise or approval no longer feels necessary for your own sense of self-worth. Instead of reacting automatically to their provocations, you respond thoughtfully, or sometimes you choose not to respond at all because you realize there is simply nothing left to prove. For a person who fully expected every single interaction to produce an emotional response, this shift in behavior can be deeply unsettling. Manipulation inherently depends on predictable reactions. When those reactions disappear, many of the old, reliable tactics they used to use completely lose their effectiveness. The conversations naturally become shorter, the arguments slowly fade away, and the emotional hooks they once used simply fail to catch. Your energy gradually shifts toward your own personal goals, your genuine relationships, and your own well-being rather than remaining tied to their erratic behavior. That quiet, calm, emotional detachment is a clear reflection of genuine healing because it demonstrates that your life is no longer organized around someone else's desperate need for control or attention. Another reason why this level of emotional independence can be far more unsettling to a narcissist than simple silence is because it effectively strips them of their ability to control the story. In many narcissistic relationships, managing their outward appearance is just as important to them as managing the people around them. They often want to carefully shape how others see them, frequently presenting themselves as the ultimate victim, the heroic savior, or the misunderstood partner, all while minimizing or flatly denying the harm they caused you. If they can successfully influence the narrative, they can protect the image they have spent so much time building and avoid having to confront any of the uncomfortable truths about their own behavior. When you are still emotionally caught in the orbit of the relationship, you might find yourself spending a massive amount of time defending yourself, explaining your side of the story, or trying to convince others of what really happened. Ironically, this behavior can keep you tied to the narcissist's version of events because your energy is still focused entirely on responding to them. But as your healing process progresses, something truly important shifts. You no longer feel that burning need to argue over every single accusation or to correct every false story they spread. You become significantly more interested in living your own life than in winning a heated debate about the past. That fundamental shift removes a massive source of control from their hands. The narcissist can absolutely continue telling their skewed version of events if they want to, but it no longer determines how you see yourself or how you live. Your identity becomes firmly rooted in your own personal values rather than their fickle opinions or their carefully curated public image. They lose the sick satisfaction of watching you chase validation or react to every single distortion they put out there. Over time, your calm, steady consistency speaks much louder than any number of endless explanations ever could. People who genuinely know you begin to form their own conclusions based on your actions, not on the stories they hear from others. The greatest disruption is not that you somehow expose them to everyone. It is that you finally stopped allowing their narrative to define your reality. One of the most difficult things for a narcissist to witness is not your sadness or your struggle after the relationship ends. It is your genuine, visible growth without them. During the time you were in the relationship, they likely encouraged you to believe that you absolutely needed them to succeed, to feel loved, or to have any confidence in yourself. Whether they did this through subtle, undermining criticism, constant unfair comparisons, or unpredictable bursts of affection, they often created an environment where your sense of self-worth was directly tied to their approval. Over time, you may have begun doubting your own capabilities and believing that true happiness was only possible if they were a part of your life. When you begin to heal, that entire belief system slowly falls apart. You start making your own major life decisions without feeling the need to seek their validation. You begin reconnecting with old friends, pursuing your own hobbies, focusing intensely on your career, or simply finding the capacity to enjoy moments of peace that once felt completely impossible to reach. Your confidence returns because it is no longer built on the shaky foundation of someone else's opinion. You begin trusting your own judgment again, and that quiet, steady confidence changes the entire dynamic of your existence. For a narcissist, this is often deeply unsettling because your progress directly contradicts the false story they wanted you to believe. If they had convinced themselves that you would always remain emotionally dependent on them, seeing you thrive creates a reality they cannot easily explain or dismiss. It directly challenges the image they had of themselves as someone who was indispensable or uniquely important in your life. The more fulfilled, happy, and emotionally grounded you become, the less believable that image of them being your savior becomes. Personal healing also removes the emotional leverage they once relied on to control you. The old fears, the deep insecurities, and the specific doubts they could once trigger no longer produce the same reactions from you. Instead of looking back toward them with a sense of longing or regret, you begin looking ahead with a clear sense of purpose, proving through your actions that your future was never actually limited by their presence or defined by their absence. If this message is helping you to understand narcissistic behavior in an entirely new way, please take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you know who might be struggling to break free emotionally. Understanding these subtle patterns can save people years of unnecessary confusion and pain. Now, let's take a closer look at what actually creates the deepest sense of loss for a narcissist. One of the most widely misunderstood aspects of narcissistic behavior is the true role of emotional supply. Many people operate under the assumption that this term only refers to obvious things like admiration, gushing compliments, or constant hollow praise. However, the concept of emotional supply is actually much broader and more complex than that. It is the fuel they need to keep their fragile ego propped up, and it is the only way they know how to interact with the world around them. When you stop providing that fuel, you leave them with nothing but their own emptiness, which is the ultimate consequence they fear most. It is important to understand that any kind of strong emotional reaction can effectively reinforce a narcissist's sense of importance. Whether you are feeling love, anger, fear, guilt, jealousy, or desperation, these reactions all serve as clear reminders to them that they still hold significant influence over your emotional world. The specific emotion you feel often matters much less to them than the simple fact that they are still capable of provoking it. This explains why some narcissists seem to be just as satisfied after successfully stirring up an argument as they do after receiving genuine admiration or praise. If they can manage to trigger a predictable response from you, they receive confirmation that they still matter in your life. Sending a long, heartfelt, emotional message, engaging in an angry confrontation, or repeatedly trying to make them understand the depth of the pain they caused can unintentionally demonstrate to them that they still occupy a great deal of your thoughts. From their perspective, your emotional engagement is often viewed as continued access to you and ongoing influence over your state of mind. Dynamic changes quite dramatically when that emotional investment finally begins to disappear. Instead of reacting to every single message, insult, or attempt to regain your attention, you start responding with calm, firm boundaries, or you choose to provide no response at all. Your focus naturally shifts toward your own personal healing, your other relationships, and your future goals rather than remaining centered on their toxic behavior. This does not happen overnight, but as your emotional energy starts to return to your own life, the source of fuel they once relied upon becomes unavailable to them. The absence of emotional supply is not about trying to punish them or playing complex mind games. It is simply the natural result of genuine recovery, where your attention is no longer consumed by someone else's desperate need for validation, conflict, or control. Your internal peace becomes far more valuable to you than any reaction they might hope to provoke. One of the greatest sources of power in a narcissistic relationship is predictability. Over time, a narcissist often carefully studies your emotional patterns, sometimes without you even realizing that it is happening. They learn exactly what makes you feel guilty, what triggers your anxiety, what words cause you to become defensive, and what actions are most likely to pull you right back into the relationship. This intimate knowledge allows them to use the same familiar tactics over and over again because they know exactly what response to expect from you. When your reactions become predictable, manipulation becomes much easier for them This is precisely why your healing journey creates such a dramatic, noticeable shift in the dynamic. As you continue to recover, you start recognizing these patterns instead of automatically reacting to them. A message that once would have sent you spiraling into a panic now becomes something you can evaluate with a calm, clear head. A comment designed to induce guilt no longer forces you to defend yourself or explain your choices. Any attempt to provoke jealousy or start an argument loses much of its impact because you finally understand the hidden purpose behind it. Instead of responding emotionally, you take a moment to pause, reflect, and choose what is actually healthiest for you. For someone who relied on those predictable emotional responses, this change can be deeply frustrating. Their usual strategies stop producing the results they once did so easily. The silent treatment no longer creates a sense of desperation in you. Unexpected compliments no longer have the power to erase their past behavior. Sudden apologies no longer guarantee that you will give them another chance. The emotional buttons they once pressed with such ease seem to disappear entirely. Your growing unpredictability does not come from playing mind games or trying to confuse them. It comes from becoming emotionally grounded and making your decisions based on your own values instead of reacting to their erratic behavior. When they can no longer anticipate exactly how you will respond, they lose one of the most effective tools they once used to maintain their influence, and the relationship no longer follows the script they had become accustomed to. For many narcissists, one of the hardest realities to accept is seeing someone build a happy, fulfilling life without them. During the time you were in the relationship, they may have subtly or even openly encouraged the belief that you would never be as happy, successful, or loved if they were no longer part of your life. They might have criticized your unique abilities, questioned your important decisions, or made you feel as though they were the sole reason for your confidence and stability. Over time, this can create the false illusion that your future depends entirely on their presence. When you start creating a meaningful, independent life on your own, that illusion starts to fall apart. You begin to develop healthier relationships, pursue personal goals, rediscover interests that were long neglected, and gradually experience a deep sense of peace that once seemed impossible. Your happiness no longer relies on winning their approval or proving your worth to them. Instead, it grows organically from your own choices, values, and experiences. This quiet, internal transformation sends a powerful message without you having to say a single word. For a narcissist, this can feel like a direct rejection of the role they believed they held in your life. If they viewed themselves as completely irreplaceable or uniquely important, watching you thrive openly challenges that belief. It suggests that their influence had distinct limits and that your identity was never truly dependent on them. This can be very difficult for someone whose entire self-image is built around the need to feel exceptional or indispensable. Your success is not about making them feel defeated or trying to prove them wrong. It is about reclaiming the parts of yourself that were overshadowed while you were in the relationship. As your confidence, stability, and emotional well-being continue to grow, your life becomes clear evidence that healing is possible and that your future is defined by your own resilience rather than by someone else's need for control. Many people believe that true freedom begins the moment they block a narcissist's phone number, delete all their old messages, or physically walk away from the relationship. While those actions are often necessary and incredibly important, they represent only the very beginning of the healing process. Physical distance creates a necessary sense of safety, but psychological freedom is what brings you lasting, genuine peace. It is entirely possible to have no contact with someone while still carrying them around in your thoughts every single day. If you are constantly replaying old conversations, imagining what you should have said in the past, wondering whether they have finally changed, or hoping they will one day recognize your true value, they continue to occupy significant emotional space in your life even though they are physically absent. True emotional freedom arrives when your inner world no longer revolves around them at all. You stop measuring your personal progress by whether they miss you, regret losing you, or attempt to return to your life. Their choices no longer determine your mood, your level of confidence, or your sense of self-worth. Instead of waking up wondering what they are thinking or doing, you begin focusing on your own goals, your relationships, your health, and your future. The energy that was once consumed by confusion and emotional exhaustion gradually becomes available for you to use in building a life that truly reflects your own values. This shift is often the most significant change of all because it cannot be manipulated or taken away by them. A narcissist may attempt to reconnect, provoke a reaction, or remind you of the past, but those efforts lose all their effectiveness when they no longer control your emotional attention. Your peace comes from within rather than from anything they might say or do. That is the exact point where the relationship truly loses its hold over you, and your life is no longer organized around the challenge of surviving their behavior, but around the beauty of fully living your own. The greatest victory you can achieve after a narcissistic relationship is not making them jealous, proving them wrong, or waiting for the day they finally realize what they lost. It is reaching a place where their opinion no longer determines your peace. Their actions no longer control your emotions, and their presence or absence no longer defines your future. No contact may create the physical distance you need, but true healing begins when your mind, your heart, and your identity are no longer tied to them in any way. That is the moment the cycle truly ends. So, if you're currently on this journey, please remember that every small step you take toward emotional freedom is a step away from manipulation and a step toward finding yourself. If this message resonated with you, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may really need this reminder today. Your healing is not measured by how much they suffer, but by how much you have grown.